Hi, my name is Emily and I'm here to do a recording of the Status Hackathon and things that are happening around there. Yesterday we had a presentation from Shruti about crypto economics and mechanism design and all these wonderful things around designing token models. So here I am, I'm going to do a 10-minute interview with Shruti today to discuss some of the concepts that are important to crypto economics. So Shruti, would you mind telling a little bit about yourself and what you do in the crypto space?
Sure. I'm Shruti Appiah. Nice to meet you all. I started off in the crypto space back in 2016 when I was really inspired by corporate social responsibility and how there is actually no way to solve that problem. So I bumped into blockchain at around the same time, and that's kind of what piqued my interest. I'm like, hey, this is actually a solution that can be used to solve this problem without requiring any government enforced regulation. So that's where I started, and then I joined Consensus and was leading an internal incentivization project for a while. And when I was working on that project, we were figuring out a few different economic mechanisms through which we can actually design that internal incentivization system. And we found that, hey, it's actually really hard to design these mechanisms, and even when we did design them and come up with a few different mechanisms, we weren't able to test them unless we implemented the whole thing and tested them on real people, which actually has some adverse consequences. Right, so that's kind of when, around January of 2017, when I went back to school, I started to think about it from a complex systems perspective as to how to take these economies and simulate them like as if they were actually real human systems, and incorporate all of those principles and behaviors into those systems, into those simulations, and study behaviors from that, make inferences from that, and also iterate that economic policies based on the results from the simulation.
That sounds absolutely fascinating, and I feel as if this whole crypto economics discipline is like this amalgamation of all these different disciplines, like the mechanism design, game theory, and token engineering, and other things sort of mashed together, and so this whole new sort of field that needs to be studied. And I think what you're doing at the moment is basically pioneering the frameworks and the frameworks to actually understand and how to design systems that actually work, rather than just all this random sort of putting together all this random stuff, but you're actually developing a structured way of thinking about it. So I'm actually really interested to know, with your simulations, how do you actually apply that concept to a simulation to see whether this is a good design or not? How does that actually play out?
Mm-hmm. And yes, like you mentioned, I want to give some credit to what you said with regards to crypto economics, mathematics, and engineering being extremely deep, as well as mechanism design as well as fairly deep. And once entrepreneurs actually go about and study those things, they would have to spend a lot of time to get very familiar with it, and then actually make use of it, make use of that wealth of research to apply to their dApps, right? So that's what we try to do. We want to take these heavy mathematics as well as scientific subjects, and we want to compose them into things that are accessible, tools and frameworks that are accessible by entrepreneurs. You can kind of think of it as how a strategizer has the lean business model canvas and the value proposition canvas in Web 2.0. We want to build similar things for Web 3.0, and simulations are definitely one of them. And to talk more about simulations, when you're actually going about and designing a token economy, oftentimes, so when we think of the engineering design process, you have a stage in which you just think about the design. You think about what problem you're trying to solve, what needs are there, and then once you build your system, you have to validate it. And typically in real life engineering systems such as aerospace engineering or in electrical engineering, you would have smaller scale systems to test it on. Especially in aerospace, you will have large airplanes being models are simulated by smaller airplanes, and like those environmental conditions would be set right up in a similar way, but on a smaller scale, so that they can be tested and then iterated on. But see, while we're designing economies right now, we don't have those kinds of tools. And even if you were to test something on Ethereum testnets, you wouldn't actually be able to study the exact same behaviors that would happen on mainnet, because people in testnet aren't actually playing around with real currency. They're just playing out with like play tokens, right? So that's where simulations can actually help, because when you're building these simulations, you simulate a system, an economic system or a social system, such that it can actually be representative of an actual true economy. And you put in all of your economic policies, you feed it into the simulation. Say, if you were to define a DAO with a very basic economy, you would define something like taxation, you can define altruism, you can define some sort of like employment, and you can feed in all of those parameters into that system, and then have like 1 or 2 parameters that you want to optimize for. Say you want to optimize for like maximum minimum wealth inequality, and if you want to optimize that parameter, you can have that aside, and then like change all of the other ones, or fix all of the other ones, so that you can and then run it iteratively, and then make inferences about that and inform your system.
Oh wow, that sounds like it's very it's definitely very useful to have that optimization piece to actually play around with some of the features to design the economy. My question is, with that sort of setup, like, would you need to have some assumptions about how the players in that system actually behave in the real world? So you're making an assumption, this is how they'll behave, and then when you optimize the parameters, you're based on those assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. If we didn't make assumptions, we would all be gods and goddesses, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you would have to make assumptions. And I think assumptions typically like fall in the category of like a lot of things that we have with regards to human behavior. The fact that we aren't fully rational people is one big assumption that we have to make. And then another, a few other ones have to do with how you can't actually fully track your system, because there can always be trading that happens behind the scenes that's not happening on the DApp, right? And if if there's an avenue for that, then that would have to be an assumption for you to make as well. But a lot of times, yes, assumptions would have to be made about in the fields of like behavioral economics, psychology, and like user or design behavior as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's true. I mean, like, I heard that some people, when they do their iterative designs, they just put a few tokens out there with like a group of demo people, and then understand how they use tokens, and then that's sort of like assumptions of how people actually behave, and then they sort of refine that. Is that how it sort of works in the real, when they actually do it in the real time?
Yeah, that can actually, like, doing it in the form of those types of demos or games are a really great way to get some of those initial ideas as to what real human behaviors could actually turn out to be. And you can actually use those, use the numbers that you get from that, from those games to put into your simulation and actually run a more informed or more accurate simulation. Likewise, a lot of studies have been performed previously as well in the same fields in terms of like human behavior, in terms of behavioral economics and psychology. So you can actually take learnings from those researchers, from those statistical studies, and you can like input them into your system. And that way it makes it way more accurate, and you would also not have to call it an assumption anymore.
Yeah, that's like a good idea to actually how to sort of implement the whole token design piece. I was also wondering, like, with the simulations and the sort of work you do, does it apply more to utility tokens, or can it also be applied to like security tokens as well?
It definitely applies to utility tokens. I haven't actually done a lot of. I haven't even tried to simulate any security tokens so far, and I'm a big believer in utility tokens, and I think that's where the main value of Ethereum really lies. And so. Mostly just like dabbled around with utility tokens and reward tokens.
Awesome, yeah, because there's been a lot of talk about security tokens, so I thought, does this also apply? And also like in terms of like the trends and things you've seen in the last couple of months, how has the utility token space sort of evolved? Has it got more sophisticated in terms of their design, or because I think originally people didn't really think that much about token design much at all. So has there been a sophistication in the way that they thought about this in the space?
Absolutely. Yeah, after that 2017 bubble burst, we've definitely seen a lot more sophistication, and in fact that's kind of why a lot of businesses like doing token design consulting are flourishing now. And definitely this year I think we've seen a bit more sophistication in it, but much of the sophistication still lies in the fact that they're using analytical methods to figure out great economies, and they're using mechanism design as one of them. And I haven't really seen simulations being used so far, but there's a lot of talk about it in the Ethereum community and even the Ethereum Foundation about using simulations, because they can reveal things that cannot be revealed through analysis or through mechanism design alone.
That's true.
Yeah, so because when you're doing mechanism design analysis, you're implementing kind of a linear approach and like high level or like very deep computations involving many different agents, many different players working at the same time. Those are not possible. So when you want to get those like macro level insights, then simulations will be helpful. Mechanism design is very helpful when you're doing more micro level, like one-on-one transaction analysis. But when you're thinking about like a space with like tens of thousands of players, each with their own different strategies, and when those strategies can just be anything, you would have to use a simulation, because if you try to do it in an analytical way, then your matrix is going to get huge, and then it's going to be very, very computationally expensive.
That is so true. So I remember like looking at game theory, it was just 2 players for like I think Christmas Delma. There's like 4 outcomes.
Yeah.
That's just 2 players. But imagine having like so many different players, like you would have such a huge matrix. That's definitely true. Yeah, I think simulations actually help you to understand the outcomes from a macro level, like when there's lots of different actors, and what is their final outcome when all these actors sort of interact in this market. What are the equilibrium outcomes? I think that's some of the results that you get from the simulation analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like the number of strategies that they can take is also a lot, right? Like when you're in a prisoner's dilemma, there's just two moves they can make, but now you'll have like 1,000 moves. So for the most part, it is just about like taking tools and taking the knowledge and the wealth of research that has been developed in like a lot of different other fields, and then applying it to the blockchain space, applying it to crypto economics. So some of the things that I actually like take inspiration from are complex systems theory, nonlinear dynamical systems. Then there's control theory, which is also very cool, and economics, of course. And there's a few things in mathematics as well that are quite inspiring. Like some of the simulations we've built are like Monte Carlo simulations and Monte Carlo simulations, and the other ones are just studying how discrete time Markov chains work. And then there's graph theory, also very well studied in mathematics. And the thing is, like, these problems have kind of been looked into, like problems of this nature have been looked into while studying other systems. So for example, like a lot of things in network science, like how like large scale computer networks work, those things function kind of similarly to how economies do, except they're a little bit more simpler, right? So taking those, like taking what tools they have used and then applying it here, is what is really going to grow the field of crypto economics.
Yeah, I think it's just the very beginning of this discipline, and it's probably going to be a lot more things to be added in to further develop this discipline. Already they're having like a lot of courses on crypto economics in universities, so this is definitely an evolving field, a really cool field to be in, because you're sort of in the leading edge of this new sort of pioneering sort of area. So yeah, but thanks so much for the interview. But what are your plans for the next couple of days in the whole in Prague and the whole DEF CON sort of menagerie?
Well, I will be just seeing Prague. Well, I'm going to be at this hackathon for tomorrow. I'm just judging the hackathon. And there's probably going to be a Halloween party after.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I heard
tomorrow.
about that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So I'm gonna go to that one. I'm gonna check out the castles.
Oh
Medieval
yeah,
castles.
definitely. Prague has so many beautiful buildings. I was just walking around getting myself lost, but it's a good experience.
Yeah. I realize I'm going about this in a very sequential format, but in DEF CON, I really want to get close with people that are thinking about simulations and token design.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday also I just spoke to a few folks from the Ethereum Foundation about it, and what we think is the next big need for the space for growing the Ethereum ecosystem, right? So want to be doing much more of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Awesome. Sounds like you're going to have a great time in the next week or two. All right. Thanks, Shruti.
Thank you.